That's my brother's beautiful playing on the pin, which I brought back to him from Thailand, the plucked string instrument. And today's book is King Monkut and the British. Apologies for the pen explosion on it. No disrespect to the king. It's a short book. After a longish introduction, it's actually pretty much all that. Primary materials, mainly in the forms of acts and letters between the kings, well, between the king and the queen and their representatives, with King Monkut and Queen Victoria. Little background on the monarchy in Thailand. Brief, and I'm no expert on it. I also have no criticisms whatsoever. However, it's impolitic to talk too much about the royalty in um, Thailand. There's strong less majesty laws. As I said, I've no critique. I'll just say that King Monkut is Rama the Fourth in the Chakri dynasty. So there are kingdoms in Thailand. You've got the Lana in the north. You've got Sukhothai in the middle. Eventually, there starts to be more of a centralizing force in Thailand around Ayutthaya. However, Ayutthaya is sacked by the Burmese in late 1700s. At this point is when the center of the country moved down the Mae Nam River to the Chao Phraya River to the Thailand area. It was first on the other side of the river in Thonburi, where I live. That was King Taksin, the last king before the Chakris. And then after King Taksin, you have Yodfa, I want to say, King Rama the First, who would be King Monkut's grandfather. So the founder of the Chakri dynasty, who then moved the capital across the river to Bangkok, was King Monkut's grandfather. King Monkut wasn't destined to, originally marked out to be king. This sometimes happens. I think I'm not talking out of turn here, where the kings have many sons, many princes. It's not always clear who will take over. In fact, the eldest, King Monkut's dad's, when he passed away, he hadn't named one of his sons successor. The eldest was an opium addict, and therefore King Monkut was chosen. At that time, he was a priest living in the monastery. It's good to know that all kings spend some time in the monastery, as most Thai males have traditionally done, even if it's as little as a week for merit making for their mums, and things of that nature. However, King Monkut was quite devout. In fact, he was a reformer. At that time, there were some Sri Lankan monks in Bonawut, I've forgotten which Wat he was in, with him, and he was also a Pali scholar. He was quite a linguist, was King Monkut. So he learned Pali, which is a Theravadan form of Sanskrit, and so he was very interested in the original scriptures and the original forms of practice in Sri Lanka. And some of the reforms that he made in Thai Buddhism, there were quite a bit, but I won't go into them too much. He instituted the Maja Puja, which is a sort of All Souls celebration. He was not a fan of, it was not without controversy, he was not a big fan of the Jatakas, which are quite appreciated traditionally in Thailand, the stories of the Buddha's former lives, some of which are almost like folk tales, some even fables where Buddha might be a rabbit. So he made a lot of reforms there. With the Pali, in fact, he was one of the first to translate the Ram Kamhen inscription stone, which is a big deal in Thai history and the history of the Thai script and all sorts of things. And I got a good look at it just the other day, as a matter of fact, in the National Museum. Very interesting part of it I found was the ghosts, the worship of the ghosts, the city ghosts, and that was a big deal in the practice at that time. So Thai Buddhism has a lot of bits of animism, a lot of Brahmanism, Hinduism, different kinds of Hinduism, and so Thai Buddhism is quite unique. Theravada Buddhism, one of the big differences in Buddhisms in the world today is Theravada, which are the older forms of Buddhism, versus Mahayana, which emerged from China and Japan, and Zen and some of the forms of Buddhism more popular in the West are Mahayana, which means like the big basket, and it's very not ecumenical. It's very universalist. So they all the Buddhas, when they attain enlightenment, instead of entering nirvana, they choose to remain until all entities enter nirvana. So that's sort of one of the big differences. And you can tell by the different colored robes and stuff that you'll see monks wearing in different practices and things like that, such as whether monasteries cultivate their own food, for example, which became a practice when it moved into China, whereas the Thai monks still take the bowls out and are fed by the villagers, or even in Bangkok you'll see them out in barefoot in robes. They only own their bowl, their robe. They have like 4 or 5 possessions. I can't remember how many possessions they're allowed. And it's not a huge burden, as I've heard some people critique on Thai society. They only eat until noon, and they're not even allowed to eat after noon. So quite a hard life. All right, lots to be said about Buddhism in Thailand, but let's just say that he was a reformer in that, as he was in many other things, and a linguist. He was friends with the French and Brits in Bangkok at the time as a monk. He calculated an eclipse. One of his interests was astronomy. He calculated an eclipse more accurately than the French by 3 seconds. So he's quite a polymath, as you can see. Some of the reforms that he made when he became king is in education for girls and women. And then the king was one of, the one thing that people know about him, so I don't want to dwell on it. One part of his life, he had Anna come to teach women and his wives and children. Some of the reforms are interesting. For example, his coronation was the first time Europeans were ever allowed in the palace, and he allowed sort of changes in dress for people to see, look at the monarch, the telegraph, ships, shipping, roads. He put the first road, Cherangkung Road, money, forms of money, coinage and bills, printing, just some of the reforms in his time. was not a fan of the nobles overtaxing the populace. This might have been the origin of the sort of Chinese tax farmers in Thailand. He allowed the UK, for example, to set up a sugar factory in Bangkok, and the Chinese attacked it. So I guess they must have had the monopoly, and then the British industrialized sugar was more competitive. He was not a fan of opium, as you can imagine, with his brother. Right. Anything else to say about the introduction period and all of this about the king? Let's get into the British side of things. So most of this then is about the Bowring Treaty, which is big deal in Thai history. So opening up Thailand to free trade with Europe. China had dominated. And then also a big part of why Thailand was never colonized. This awareness about Europe and how the European powers worked, playing them off, against each other, maintaining relationships with them. And as you know, Thailand was never colonized, as you may know. So, a couple interesting things happened. When the Queen sent the first letter, or maybe draft of the treaty over, sent it with a fellow named Parkes. Parkes wasn't quite as politic as Bowring. It was a long journey also to get there, but he basically, he arrives in Thailand, and the Queen's letter is like her representative in Thai idea. So, therefore, should be received like a queen. Therefore, the Thais set about preparing a elaborate reception for this letter with many boats and all kinds of protocols. It took a few days. And Parkes, it has to be said, showed a typical sort of Western impatience, sort of set the tone for our relationships to this day, sometimes between expats and Thais. He was a bit petulant, and when finally then the letter is received, the king sets about immediately translating it. He wants a very accurate version of the English as well as the Thai, so that he can share that with not only with all of his people, and also with the British delegation. The Parker doesn't want to wait for this translation, so he takes the reply. The king is translating the reply as well, and just buggers off back to England. So that was, I thought, a little bit interesting start to the whole shebang. Right. Another thing that happened, so they set up, the king is constantly getting land, appropriating land for the Brits to have little embassies and things of this nature. Nonetheless, at a certain point, one of the Brits got too greedy and wanted to speculate sort of, in business outside of the diplomatic work. And the Brits were not allowed to own land. That's still the case. Foreigners cannot own land in Thailand. So this is the beginning of this workaround. It would be the kind word. From the Thai perspective, it could also be considered sort of I'm not going to go so far as to say fraud, but sort of intent to evade the law. One of the British officials has his secretary, who's his Thai secretary, leased the land for him with like I don't remember if it was a 99-year lease or the way they do things nowadays. So clearly, like in effect, owning the land. This becomes a big brouhaha because the Thais don't even punish the Brits for doing this. They punish the secretary, who's a Thai citizen, but the Brits are very offended that someone in their embassy has been rebuked, and this becomes a big issue. That's another one of their sort of misunderstandings early on. When you read about all of the protocol on the parts of the Thais, you can one could go away with impressions about how elaborate, to put it in a nice way, they are, or Byzantine, I think might be the word. How over elaborate it could also be considered by some, not me. However, I really want to point out, you can catch glimpses of this in the original documents, how equally so are the Brits. So, for example, going around always with their swords, at a certain point they're asked, "Wouldn't you please leave your swords aside as we go into the harem? No swords are allowed." So yes, so that as well. It's not all misunderstandings, but I just, I did pick out a couple of those. And of course, much of this is to be expected. There are no translators yet. These are the first contacts. Obviously, the kings learned English. No one's learning Thai to communicate with the Thais in their own language. Another trend that continues to this day. So I want to give you a little taste of these documents, and you can get sort of a view of the British attitude to the Thais. In the intercourse with representatives of foreign powers in Siam, you will study to this is the instructions by the Foreign Office to their officers in Thailand. You will study to maintain the most amicable relations. It is sincerely be anticipated that any of them should seek by undue means to acquire influence over the kings or their ministers, but if they should do so, it will be no part of your business to enter into an unseemly contest for superiority. This reads to me like an experience the Brits must have had perhaps in India with court being drawn into court intrigues. The estimation which the British government, from its known power and wealth, and from the undeviated justice and rectitude of its conduct, cannot fail to be held in Siam, will secure for its representative all the weight that can be required for British purposes, and will assure an attentive hearing for anything which may have to urge on behalf of British interests. Intrigues will in the long run turn to the prejudice of those who condescend to resort to them, while a menacing attitude or language will fail to overcome the resistance of a proud and haughty government, which in moments of irritation may forget its inability to offer effectual resistance to any just demands that may be made upon it. So in other words, although, this is a fly we can swat, not a dog to be poked, nonetheless, don't provoke. It's also said that among a ceremonious people, you will not obtain consideration by making light of forms. So respect the Thais again. And you will therefore require that all proper forms of courtesy should be observed towards you. And then the next paragraphs go on to talk about British citizens in the state, again requiring that they be respected, but also that they be respectful. So quite interesting, I thought. Right, so they sent an embassy to Queen Victoria, so some Thais go off bearing a long list of gifts. Not quite tribute in the way that I think Chinese potentates were required to offer sort of tribute, just in the form of reciprocities where the queen had also sent gifts to the Thai king. But it is interesting to see what those gifts are, but I won't bore you with that. However, I will say that I believe it's a Thai custom to this day, I think, to not open gifts in front of the person. However, they were obviously presented directly in the case of their eventual audience with Queen Victoria, which took some doing. Right, so next we have, and then at the end they nip off to see Napoleon III, I want to say, in Britain, in France, real quick. It's an obvious afterthought. They're clearly more interested in England. I did want to say, what surprised me in a positive way was how open Britain was to really showing the Thais everything that they wanted to see in England. They went eventually, not just from London. I can't remember if they went up to Windsor to try to find the Queen at one point. But anyway, they went to Birmingham, Manchester, Liverpool, Sheffield, visiting every manufacturers of consequence. They wanted to see courts and palaces, House of Lords and Commons. I wish we had more information about how all of this was reported back in Thailand and what they made of it. Mint, bank, docks, shipbuilding establishments, manufactories, museums, hospitals, prisons, churches, clubs, laboratories, galleries of paintings, Crystal Palace, gasworks. Oh, and by the way, as these poor Thai officials are visiting these things, they're desperately ill with colds and flus, but they refuse to stop. Theaters, amusements, public dinners, reviews, observatories, the River Thames as far down as Woolwich, etc., vast amounts of shipping, docks, minute inspection of the Great Leviathan within and without. Right, so I will admit that the Brits were quite open in showing the Thais whatever it was that they wanted to see. So perhaps not just was the king quite interested in the wider world, but maybe the Thais in general. At this point in history. So they also said something very interesting was they were also crossed the other colonies on the trip there and back in the British ships. They said they crossed other territories allegedly friends to England. So that alleged was quite interesting. The king dies in 1868 while going on a journey in the jungle from tuberculosis, the jungle fever, to see another eclipse, and receiving another British delegation there, and was succeeded by King Chula, so Rama V. We're now up to Rama X. Recently, the situation is analogous to Britain, where recently Queen Elizabeth obviously passed away after a long, long reign and is rather overshadowing her son's takeover. Same in Thailand. The previous Rama IX recently passed away, unfortunately, and has been replaced by Rama X, his son. And this, by the way, King Chula was the first to go to Britain in 1897, and thus began a tradition of Thai princes studying abroad. So that is a little bit about King Monkut and the Brits. Interesting book if you are interested in primary documents. There's some wrapped up in a neat little cover with a longish introduction that gives some pretty good background there, I thought. And thank you for listening.